of Urban One Incorporated, Radio One, or any of its subsidiary companies. Attorney Nathaniel Lee, a lawyer with credibility, success, and experience. Representing people in hundreds of jury trials, Nathaniel Lee is who you want by your side in the courtroom. You've seen the rest, now hire the best. Contact Lee, Cosell, and Feigley today. And now, to address the legal concerns of the community, Praise AM 1310, 95.1 FM presents Legally Speaking. Here are today's hosts.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you once again for joining us for this very important show. Thank our VIP guests, Attorney Primes, Banks, and Grimes, and all the wonderful people that call in. Thank you so much. Next weekend, of course, is a Memorial Day weekend, so we won't be broadcasting. But there's so many historic events that are occurring every day, and we're going to get right into it today, starting with that monumental decision with the Voting Rights Act that's going to be like an 800-pound gorilla for our community for a long time in the future. You know, it will basically dramatically reduce the number of representation by African Americans in the Congress. And along with other things, we're seeing a rollback of the civil rights fights in the 60s, the 50s, the 40s, and we're seeing a dramatic rollback. So we'll start out today talking about that monumental adverse decision that's still bothering me today. The problem that exists is that these Supreme Court decisions affect your daily life. This decision was as bad as the Chief Justice Roger B. Taney, who served as Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court up until 1864. He's the one that wrote the decision of Dred Scott versus Sanford decision, which ruled that enslaved Black people could not be U.S. citizens, among other things. You know, so at that time, Blacks were considered property, and I guess not even human beings in his eyes. But historically, a lot of the Supreme Court judges during that time period, they themselves owned slaves. And so, but when we look at the current climate, we look at the political gerrymandering, it looked like we're trying to roll back every right we fought, we bled, we died for, are being eviscerated. So having said that, how are you guys doing today?
Okay. Doing fine. Good morning, everyone.
How impactful you believe that this decision with the Voting Rights Act will be on representation in our community?
Yeah, I think it's just going to be devastating. And good morning, everybody. I think about it this way. Louisiana has a history of discrimination, as do many of our Confederate states and northern states as well. And there were a series of, schemes that state legislatures and local governments enacted to keep African Americans from voting. And if you look at some of the records and the legislative history that was compiled for the passage of the Voting Rights Act, you had whole communities in the South where you had a large percentage of African Americans, but nobody was registered because of gerrymandering, poll taxes, grandfather clauses, all these sort of things. So this is what the Voting Rights Act was designed to eradicate. And so in 1982, the Supreme Court under Rehnquist, when he was the Chief Justice, basically entered a decision indicating that intentional discrimination had to be proved. And so Congress snapped back and said, wait a minute, no. We understand all these schemes, and it's not the intent, because a lot of these provisions like grandfather clauses, poll taxes, they were benign in terms of race. They applied to everybody. but they had a large impact on African Americans. So they said in the new legislation in 1982 that it wasn't the intent, it was the impact. And so this Supreme Court basically said in the Calais decision that, hey, we're going to ignore what Congress said. And your audience, Nathaniel, should remember this is a crowd, these conservative justices are of the crowd that, hey, we should strictly interpret the Constitution, strictly interpret statutes. And they just threw the legislative intent out the window. Now, in terms of the impact of this, we're seeing this throughout the South, where state legislatures are, recalling, ballots that have already been cast and indicate that in the middle of an election, that they're going to, vote again. And this time they're going to have districts that don't have adequate, representation. So let's just kind of put this into focus. You have 30% of the population in Louisiana is African American, all right? And, they basically are now moving under the Voting Rights Act. You want to give them an opportunity to elect the person of their choosing. So there was a majority minority district. So the Supreme Court basically is saying you can't have that. So instead of having one of those six district or two of those six district, putting African Americans in there of a certain percentage so they could potentially elect a candidate of their choice, they're dissipating them. And instead of 60% of the vote in a particular district or 50%, they're 20% spread out. So there's a possibility they'll have no representation and no voice. And what we're seeing throughout the South, particularly in Memphis, they're basically in the state legislature, they're stripping Black Democrats of their committee assignments. So it's really devastating for our democracy to have significant portions of our population that essentially will have no voice in our democracy.
Yeah. Well, one of the most tragic part about this is down in Tennessee. I've been watching that. They rely heavily on sales taxes. And so I was trying to determine how you develop a strategy when their source of taxation is based upon consumption, which means that, you can't, it would be impossible to bring food and things into the Black community to avoid paying these taxes to the state of Tennessee. But I think they need an effective strategy to deal with this new assault on civil rights, particularly in Tennessee. It's all over the country we're seeing this occurring. And
Absolutely, and particularly right now, attorneys, colleagues in the South, and Attorney Lee, you've mentioned the redistricting, the redrawn map in Tennessee, which eliminates the only majority Black district, District 9. And this is simply a blatant attempt, not even being, trying to hide it, to take away the people's right to select candidates of their choice. And so the I am happy to see because, in my view, this redistricting does amount to intentional discrimination in violation of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. And so the NAACP and others have filed a lawsuit alleging that those lawmakers in Tennessee that they intentionally redrew the Congressional District 9 um, uh, they intentionally withdrew Congressional District 9, which is a district that is anchored in Memphis for more than 50 years, to crack the majority Black district across multiple districts. And they did this with the insidious intent of eliminating Black voting power and depriving them of a meaningful opportunity to elect candidates of their choice. Now in Tennessee, there is, as a result of this new map, which cracks District 9 into 3 districts. Now there is a 9-0 Republican delegation with 0 Democrats and 0 Black representatives. And I have always thought, as these insidious efforts were taking place, that this is not just partisan gerrymandering, but this is intentional racial discrimination. And those are exactly the arguments that are being made in response to this Supreme Court 6-3 decision, which, as you stated, Attorney Lee, harkens back to Dred Scott and Plessy versus Ferguson.
Yeah, well, I can see it clearly here in California politics, as I tried to clarify last week, where you have at-large elections have existed and have kept minority districts from having a voice in the local elections, county elections, by not being able to select or run a candidate at large because of the expense of running the candidate. So we finally got district elections in some of the areas, and we see now the minority participation in the city council, minority participation in the school boards, etc. So I can imagine what would happen if that's undone and we go back to at-large elections where we don't have the ability to elect someone from the entire county. We have to have district elections in order to have representation. So it's definitely intentionally done to dilute the effect of minority votes, which is part of our democracy.
You know, counselors, you know, what we have to do to get out of this vicious cycle is something obvious. If we don't create a sense of urgency within our community for 100% of the folks who recognize the importance of their voice be heard at the ballot box this year and next year and the year after that, we're running into a situation where we're seeing a dramatic rollback of the rights that we fought so hard. We bled, we died, we sacrificed, and we're losing those rights right before our eyes in real time. And these folks who have this divergent political views, you know, I talk to people every day, and some of the Trump type supporters, and you know, one of the things that disturb me, I get in these debates with folks all the time, particularly when I'm out and about. They're saying, well, we're tired of these illegal immigrants receiving all these government benefits. You know, it just drives me crazy. You have to tell them, you're wrong. They're not eligible to receive unemployment, Social Security, food stamp. They're prohibited. In fact, in Indiana, it's even worse. In Indiana, folks, our governor, who I have a great deal of problem with, he took away health insurance benefit for undocumented immigrants. In other words, they could pay for health insurance, but only get emergency medical care, which you don't get turned away anyway at the hospital. If you have an emergency situation, they're required to treat you, regardless of whether or not you have insurance or not. But he took away the insurance, so undocumented immigrant can't have surgical procedure when they become disabled, like knee surgery or hip surgery, which are scheduled. And no longer will the state plan pay for that. And it's just a sad situation in our democracy. And so one of the biggest excuses I've heard, counselors, is the fact that a lot of people in our community are misinformed on the issue of benefits. During the pandemic, folks, when people were dying every day and we had shelter in place, the government gave out, in Indiana, for example, $950 a week to every American citizen. Not one penny of that went to immigrants, not one penny. And so when you're looking at this situation about the aberration of our rights, don't use this as an excuse not to vote, because that's the number one problem that I've heard people complain about. Or the second thing, though, I don't know about you guys, but the second thing has been that it won't make any difference. So it's driving me crazy, this issue about voting that I deal with on a regular basis. I hope you have a better idea.
Yeah, I think that one of the things we have to be careful of is diversion. There's a wonderful book out there by Isabel Wilkerson called The Warmth of Other Suns, and the sequel to that book is called Caste. Nathaniel, your audience should be. I recommend both of those books, but the author, who's a graduate of HBCU, makes the argument that these immigrants that came over from Europe, they had a lot in common with African Americans that were fleeing the South during the Great Migration, but they were divided, and instead of working together, they were working in opposite poles. And I think we're seeing the same thing. And your audience should be aware that this is a playbook that's been used constantly. In the 80s, you had welfare queens that President Reagan used. Then you had affirmative action was a big boogeyman. Then you had our brothers LGBTQ community, they were the boogeyman. And now you have immigrants. So, this is a pattern. And I think we have to realize that we have a lot in common, trying to, educate our families, trying to get good jobs. I mean, those are the things that we have in common that we really need to emphasize. But finally, I'll say about the issue regarding your governor, it's a band-aid and a temporary solution. So what you're saying is that we just went through a pandemic. And so what we're saying is that somebody that could have a contagious disease is not going to be treated. So that's obviously going to have an adverse impact on everybody. And you want people to be able to, go and get medical care. In fact, there's a EMTALA, which is a federal statute that basically indicates irrespective if you have insurance, you should be cared for and at least stabilized. So I think it's going to be problematic on that front, but it's not something that helps us. And these schemes are just what they are, schemes to divide us instead of bringing us together.
Attorney Banks? Okay. The other thing, too, that bothered me about this is that why is it that these adverse cases keep populating before the Supreme Court versus there's thousands of cases where people are trying to take to the Supreme Court? Why are we seeing such an increase in these type filing? This case was filed by some non-white people or something goofy. And why are they getting so many Supreme Court cases and all these rollback and civil rights and things like that? It seemed like to me that the court is targeting these adverse cases to turn the country back to the, 1900s. What's the reason we're seeing that, you think?
You sound like you think the Supreme Court is intentionally doing the president's work for him, Nathaniel. Is that what you're saying?
Well, there's a history of the Supreme Court when it goes back to Roger B. Tanner, Chief Justice, and the one that made those dreadful slave decisions. And he was a very active jurist, and he changed the course of American history. If he'd have made any neutral decision, slavery could have ended a lot sooner. But instead, it was ratified by the Supreme Court and somehow justified. So politically, the Supreme Court members, who many of themselves owned slaves, thought it was a good idea. And they populated that by making these really bad decisions back in the 1800s. And we're seeing a repeat of these bad decisions now in my mind.
Yeah, I think one of the things to look at, and I think you're absolutely right, that it was one of the worst decisions that the Supreme Court has ever issued in terms of the Dred Scott. because, it basically canceled out the Missouri Compromise, which is a kind of a temporary band-aid, and basically said slavery was going to exist anywhere a slave went. So it did lead to the Civil War. And the point I think that I want to make is a solution is the legislative branch got off their, keister and basically did something. You had the radical Republicans at that time following the Civil War that were instrumental in passing the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. And as I alluded to before, when the Supreme Court got out of whack with their interpretation of the Voting Rights Act in the 80s, Congress voted overwhelmingly to reestablish the Voting Rights Act. And interestingly, your audience should know, Nathaniel, they did it over the objection of a young lawyer that worked at the Justice Department, and his name was John Roberts. So part of the solution has to be, we have to push our legislative branch, our Congress, to take steps. They have the authority, they're a co-equal branch of government, to pass legislation to make sure that everyone is included in our democracy. And you're right, Nathaniel, through our vote, we can encourage them to do that.
Yeah, one of the other concerns, and speaking of voting, there is a great deal of discussion now about voter protection and that the scheme to suppress voter turnout. And we saw a classic example of how you suppress voter turnout in the Texas race that occurred. They changed the voter precinct of folks. Like here in Indianapolis, you could vote anywhere in the county, so early voting, we had no excuse. I think we had a 15% turnout, but you could vote at any location that you're close to. And it only took, for me to vote, it took about 2 minutes. From the time I got inside of the voting place, they checked my ID, then I went and voted, and then I was out the door. Now, when I went to vote, there was a large gathering of people running for office, about 70 to 75, right? And there was only 2 voters. And that disturbed me. I'm thinking, these folks are making an incredible effort to try to increase voter participation, and the people are not responding. And there's almost like there's not a sense of urgency. So let's go to the line now. Imhotep, you had a question coming for today, sir. Go ahead.
Good morning. Good morning to all my great legal scholars here on another Saturday. We really appreciate you, Brother Nate. I voted early at the Pike Library. It was a good turnout. That was on the Sunday before. That was the Sunday before the election. So it was a good turnout. I think I got there by 11:30 or so. So it was a pretty good crowd. And so I don't know what happened on Tuesday. I think the final numbers has 21% or 20, was it up eligible voters? I think it was up some, but not what we should see. Roland Martin is called.
No, it's 15%, just 15.4%.
15? Oh, it's lower. It's lower than before. Okay. Because Roland Martin just sent a message out to Georgia black voters. He said he pulled the numbers from Georgia, and it's 500, I think it said 690 or 592,000 registered voters between 18 and 30 that did not vote in the last election. And he said, you all are complaining, youth are complaining, but if you don't get out and vote, especially that demographic, then you see the policies you have, daycare being restricted and student loans being restricted and things like that. So I don't know if you guys probably said you may have discussed it, SCOTUS in Virginia. That was sad. And then I wanted to ask you guys about the American Bar Association. I don't know if Attorney Banks is on with us, but if she is, I'd definitely like to hear this from her, being a National Bar Association president. The American Bar Association just reprieved their requirement on DEI as far as admissions to law schools. And I know that there's a difference between both. I'm not a lawyer, but my mother has educated me over the years about the difference between the both. But it seemed like the people, from all the comments online, they're very angry. Even black lawyers are angry that we have lawyers capitulating to the demands of Trump, and they really upset. And then lastly, Tina Peters getting her sentence commuted by a Democratic governor because Trump withheld the clean water money from the Clean Water Air Act for Colorado. So it's basically exploitation, what do you want to call it? Basically, making them capitulate to these demands. And so we're seeing things in real time that I don't even know if young people are really understanding what's going on. I know we have to keep them abreast of what's happening, but I mean, for us, I'll be 60 this year. For us in this bracket, it's ridiculous out here. So I'd like to hear you guys' legal opinions on those, and thanks for taking my call.
Well, let me respond. Sad to say, I've been a member of the American Bar Association, and this last year, probably the last time I ever sent them a check. I also was a life member of their foundation, because at one time, the American Bar Association stood for diversity, equity, and inclusion. What we've seen, Imhotep, around the country is a dramatic decrease in access to higher educational institution, and it's across the board. And all of your learned sciences and things like that, there's a dramatic drop-off from the MIT, Harvard. If you look at the number of African Americans being admitted, it's probably down to 10% of what it used to be, or less than 10%. So this idea that the American Bar Association voted to eliminate a rule that requires law schools to demonstrate their commitment to diversity in recruitment, admission, and student programming is a sad day. And the point of that is we're seeing a rapid erosion of rights and benefits that we fought, died, sacrificed for. We're seeing those rights being dissipated day by day. When an organization like the American Bar, and in response to that, I did not send my dues of this year. I'm a life member of the foundation, but I don't think I'm ever going to send another check to the American Bar Association until they reverse their way, because the American Bar Association at one point became a leader in the effort to desegregate the practice of law. And now they've gone back, look like, apparently we got new leadership there within the American Bar Association, but it's a sad day when they did that. Made no mistake about it. See, they capitulated to the Trump administration, who requested they do that, which is sad.
That was my point.
Their pocketbooks.
That is my point as well, that unfortunately, and after having partnered and collaborating with the American Bar Association actively in advocating for diversity, equity, and inclusion, which has been one of the passions of my career, it is unfortunate that the American Bar Association is reversing its long-standing leadership in the area of diversity and equity and inclusion. And that's equally as unfortunate that so many of the major law firms, as you know, capitulated to the administration's attacks as well. And so totally unfortunate and inconsistent with my passions and my values and my advocacy over my entire career.
Hey, Counselor, but you were president of the National Bar Association. Crickets is all I've heard from them about this. I didn't see them come out forcefully to criticize them. What's going on?
Everybody is afraid of the administration and the penalty that this man can impose on their pocketbooks. So they're afraid to do anything against him. I hate to say this, Vanita, but because I sound like a misogynist if I do, but the 3 minority jurors on the Supreme Court have pretty much set out what this voting rights law has done to our society and our democracy. And it goes with my belief for a long time, we need more women on the Supreme Court and in political offices. look like we're going to be getting less. But I just think some of us think more for the benefit of the majority than we do for our individual selves. And I think that women seem to do that. I sound like an old man, I know, but that's my belief and feeling.
Yeah, I agree that our society works best when we have inclusive, and all voices are heard. And one of the things, Nathaniel, that your audience should be aware of is that there's a famous story by Thurgood Marshall when he sat on the U.S. Supreme Court. His fellow justices were having this theoretical discussion about the Commerce Clause, which your audience should know is just a theory as it relates to, whether or not when federal government can impose its power on a local jurisdiction. And he broke into the conversation and said, "Look, I've experienced this. I have had to drive from town to town to town. I couldn't use the bathroom. I could not get a sandwich. Of course, that's going to impact interstate commerce." And Justice Brennan retold that story and says, a lot of us had not experienced that. And that's the whole value of diversity, hearing from somebody else's perspective. So I think it is a sad day, in our society, in terms of the ABA and their vote. And I think we can't lose sight of the overall push by this administration to demonize DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. It is our strength, not a weakness or not discrimination, in my view. All it's basically saying is that we're going to open up, the net, and allow, job interviews, opportunities by all. And finally, I'll point out that this administration is basically pressuring the National Football League on their diversity rule called the Rooney Rule. It was named after the one of the founders of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And all it basically said is that you have a head coaching job, that you should make sure that you have a diverse pool of candidates. I mean, what in God's name is wrong with that? But, again, we have not been vocal enough, in my view, in terms of pushing back on this notion that somehow just saying the words diversity, equity, and inclusion is a dirty word. And it really isn't, in my view.
Well,
Caller. We have a caller.
okay, go ahead, caller.
Hi, good morning. This is Renee. I called in a little early because I have to get.
Hey,
So.
Renee,
But anyway,
I
I
want
just
to
want to.
congratulate your mayor. He balanced the budget in 120 days. Incredible.
Isn't it incredible? It's amazing what politicians and elected officials can do when they're not gaslighting you. Isn't that amazing?
Increased
I'm being
benefits.
sarcastic.
It's an
Yeah.
amazing job. And all he did was say, you billionaires need to pay more in taxes.
Yes. And they did. They're not leaving. Millionaires, people, this is the gaslighting that the Democratic Party has done to us as well. Well, the Republicans just flat out lie. The Democrats have told us all this time that we can't do this because we just don't have the. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. And why Mamdani is so popular is because he's shown, and why the Democratic leadership is mad at him is because he's shown that we've been lied to for all these decades, that they can't get stuff done because. Well, he's gotten it done in like 3 months. He's balanced the budget. And what he's also done, and what Pennsylvania governor has done in less than 3 months, she got insulin reduced to a $35 copay for all Virginians. They're lying to us. Both parties are, the leaderships. They're lying to us. And so we need to fix the Democratic Party leadership. There was a post that came out that Mike Johnson was talking about how all these mini Mamdanis are popping up all over the place, and he was upset about it. But they're popping up because they see what Mamdani has done in less than 3 months, and people are trying to elect people that can fix this quickly and to protect them and give them the rights that they want. I love my mayor. I don't care what anybody else has to say about him. He's doing the job over here. But the reason I called in is because of, I like you all. It breaks my heart to hear that, we're going to be fighting this fight again that my parents fought, your parents fought. I somewhat had a foot in it. And I'm mad about it. But I think this is a good point to drag young people in. And what I was saying was that we need to teach up the young people because now they understand, they're seeing it. And I don't think some of the ways that our ancestors have fought this fight is going to be the same way that we fight it now. We don't have to use mail to get word out. We don't always have to meet in person. We have so many more tools that we can use to fight this fight. And just like Iran has figured out, we don't need, and America has figured out, the big bombs don't just work anymore. Drones, precision works.
Hmm.
And we have to get more, we have to be more strategic right now. And protests are good, but they're one and done. Boycotts work better because they're sustaining, as you know, what happened, in Montgomery, throughout the country with the boycott of transportation. But I don't know if our population has the wherewithal to stand 300 and some, almost a year of not having something that they're used to having, but they're going to have to get used to because they're not going to sustain not having the privilege of deciding who's going to represent them in their best interest. So, and I think, and one last thing, and then I'm going to have another caller get in. The other thing is that we're framing this in a way that is eliminating Black representation in the form of Black people. What it's doing is eliminating the representation of Black people and other people who want a democracy and who want a democratic vote. They want their vote to count as well. I mean, some of our allies might choose some of the same people that we're choosing to represent because we have the same values, we like the same policies. So I think it's a bigger framing that we need to be engaging in, just like, Martin Luther King Jr. did and eventually Malcolm X, is that it's not just about Black people. Yes, we're the first, we get hit hard, but everybody else does too. And I think women should have figured that. Yes,
Renee, I don't know if you're running across this, but the biggest problem that I run across with so-called Black conservative, when you talk about voting and undocumented workers and things like that, they are under the illusion that undocumented workers receive government benefits, such as Social Security, Medicare, unemployment benefits, or food stamp. All is false, of course, but when I've talked to the so-called conservative type Black folks, that's their big hang-up. It drives me crazy. And I show them on the cell phone, I said, that's not true. They still don't believe it. It's just amazing to me.
Well, it obviously shows that we have to do a deeper dive into educating our communities and white communities too, because, we cannot get people elected that are working in our best interest and everybody else's best interest without our white allies. And many of them are misinformed as well. And I think we have to do a better job of that. This is not going to happen overnight. It's my personal opinion. And as a person that's, deep into politics and try to do everything I can to educate other folks, even my family in the South and people I know in the South and across the country, the best I can say is that we just have to continue to educate. And unfortunately, social media is going to have to be that platform, even though there's a lot of garbage in there. But if you build a following of trusted people who trust you, and that the information that you send out, you start making a breakthrough. And I think that is essential to how we fight this. It's like we got to build, all of us have to build a community that we educate people. And once each of us build our own communities. So we've educated people. We can send people out to educate more people. We can come together as this huge group. And I'm excited that I heard today on the news, on MS Now, that the top Black grassroots supporters, along with the civil rights leaders, all had this conference, this virtual conference call of 200 of them to discuss next step plans. Not that they weren't meeting before, but now they have to do some things different. And I love that that's happening behind the scenes, and so they can disperse their soldiers to get out there and make this happen for the community. But I'm going to hang up and let you guys talk to other people. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you.
Nathaniel, is the NBA working behind the scenes on some of these issues?
I've not seen any evidence of it. You might talk to Attorney Banks, former president of the NBA, and she's more in tune than I am. I don't know, Attorney Banks, what's the situation with NBA?
I am sure that the National Bar Association is working behind the scenes. Our president is Ashley Upkins, and she is located in Nashville, Tennessee, where we're hosting our annual meeting this July. And so I'm sure that she's collaborating with civil rights and civic organizations across the nation in addressing these issues. I'm speaking in my role as past president of the National Bar Association, decrying the announcement by the American Bar Association. I think the American Bar Association, they're in an awkward position, if you will, as having been the certifier of U.S. law schools for decades, and the administration has declared that they are no longer, well, they are attacking the American Bar Association at this time as the certifying body. And even some states have announced that the American Bar will no longer have a say in certifying U.S. law schools.
Terrible. Go ahead, Guy. Guy's our next caller. You have a question coming for us, Guy. Go ahead, sir.
Yes. Good morning, folks. I just wanted to say that I think that we have to become laser focused in terms of trying to remedy our current situation, in terms of the particularly the government in general, but particularly the federal government. I think that the phrase checks and balances, I think we have to scrutinize those words, because when you talk about electing folks, I think you have to talk about electing effective representatives that will not put party above the wishes of the people that they're supposed to represent. I think we need to laser focus on that. But I think we also need to look at the words checks and balances, because that can refer to a financial situation. You know, you can talk about checks that are contributed to a particular candidate and balances in their bank account. So I think we need to really look at those words, checks and balances, and act accordingly in terms of the wishes of the people.
Yeah, so what do you think, Guy, about the rollback in voter participation by basically eviscerating the Voter Rights Act?
Well, I think that, you know, back in the day, in the 70s particularly, there was a course called the Action Course Practical Politics that was issued by the United States Chamber of Commerce, and some of us participated in that course. And one of the things of that course was you may not agree with what certain people are doing, but they have the right to do what they're doing unless they're stopped. So, to paraphrase it, I think that we need to look at the rollback in terms of certain people in the country have wishes about other people in the country. And I think that you need to take action to prevent those people that you disagree with or disagree with you accordingly. And what this takes practically is, as a lot of people are saying, people have to register and vote and in enough numbers to get your point of view across. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I'm sitting here thinking, and it's a sense by many people, I'm beginning to feel some of it myself, that a lot of our politicians, I won't give a percentage to it, but I see some, even minority politicians, even people who went in with good intentions, seem to come out after a year or two with their coffers, personal pockets, a little fuller than when they went into this game. And is there something that about being a politician that entitles one to profit personally from their position, which seems to be going on more so now, and we see it in the open than before? Is that because of our leader is just outright taking advantage of his political position and taking every penny he can that's put in front of him? I don't know. I sense from the public when I talk to people, what's the use? What's the use? Our vote don't count, and the politicians are ripping us off.
Well, they have access to sensitive information, and they can benefit from the stock market, among other things. So they have, but on the other hand, they have historically low salaries now. The people in Congress salaries about 180 something per year, but they have to maintain two households. They effectively,
The checks and balance is not keeping other things in check and balance.
that's true. But
Next
sorry.
caller.
yeah, Pierre, you have a question or comment for today. Go ahead, sir.
I don't know. Can you hear me?
Hey, Pierre, I can't hear you. What did you say?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Loud and clear. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, real quickly, everything everybody said today is just dead on point. But when I'm out in society and everything, for the most part, people are doing okay. Folks still working, cashing checks. They don't care. They don't care. These young folks don't care. One of the things I put in the comments out there, I haven't heard anything from Black Hollywood. They lead the social things going on in the U.S., especially among Black folks, young Black folks. I don't hear anything from our friends out there in L.A., the big social influencers and all of that. So maybe Milton can speak to that. But we're just in a bad position. And, you got 30% of Louisiana, like Grimes said, Black. Hell, if they all half of them just vote, Landry wouldn't even be governor. I don't know, man. I just hope things turn around soon because we're getting our teeth kicked in, but it's partly due to our lack of participation in some of these elections. But everybody's just right on target. And like, Nate, Ed Delaney hit it right on the head. One of the reasons they're going after the things that they're going after these judges in Marion County and all that, because they don't want you Black lawyers in the courtroom. Period. I don't want to look at y'all. They don't want y'all arguing before them. Ed Delaney said that, and he's a lawyer and he's a white man. Been practicing in Indiana for about as long as you have. So there it is. But thank you for taking my call.
I don't know, Pierre. I can't justify or raise a defense for Hollywood celebrities, African American celebrities. What are they doing with their wealth? I don't see it coming back to the community to the degree that you would expect it either. So uh, it's something that needs to be addressed. You're right.
You need to jump on it, Milton.
No, I don't need to
You
jump
out there?
nothing. I'm 80 years old. I don't jump off of stuff, brother. You know, I'm sitting on this program when I don't have a lot to contribute anymore. I feel like, life has got to go on with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we've been here before, and
Have we been here before, Vanita? This has seemed to be a little bit more drastic than before to me.
well, we've been here before, in my opinion, and at this inflection point in our history, um, we have to continue this fight because
That's true.
our work is just not finished. And so while we're outraged by this uh, Supreme Court decision, there's so many things that we can still do at this point if we organize and if we mobilize. And we're seeing evidence of organizations. I think one of the callers stated that there are conversations occurring among hundreds of organizations across the nation to address this. And today, you may be aware of the All Roads Lead to Selma event that is taking place at this time. The purpose is to gather organizations from across the nation to memorialize and commemorate Bloody Sunday. Bloody Sunday. They are convening initially at the Edmund Pettus Bridge as we speak to remember our ancestors whose blood and advocacy led to the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And then they're moving to a rally at the Capitol building in Montgomery. It's a starting point, and we understand that we've got to exercise a lot of different things from protests to boycotts to exercising our economic $2 trillion economic power and political power as well. In response to the opinion, we need to learn the election laws in our states because they're all different. There are many arguments that can be made, legal arguments that can be made in response to this redistricting that we're seeing across the South. And it's happening, colleagues, because we are winning. We have an unprecedented number of representatives in the United States Congress, 62. And as a result of this Supreme Court case, we stand to lose potentially a third of the members of the Congressional Black Caucus. And so when we fight, we win. We've got to look at all of our options. We've got to be strategic. And I'm confident that we can win again if we come together, united, exercising the blueprint that has already been laid by our ancestors, which of course needs to be updated.
Vanita, I agree with you. I was a little bit pessimistic when I responded to you, and I apologize for that. But you're right. You're right. We need to, but it is kind of disappointing to watch our celebrities and our young African Americans flaunt their wealth, it seems, in the face of all of this happening. They don't seem to have as much attention to it as we would desire. But you're right. You're right.
We've come too far to turn back now.
Agree.
And so I have been on almost nightly calls with organizations since this ruling to talk about, how we respond. One of the efforts is being led by the Black Leadership Collective, which has a goal of registering 1 million voters. It's called 1 million Black Voters Rising. And I've also placed a lot of different links in the chat of initiatives and programs that our callers can participate in as we're organizing nationally to address this rollback of our civil rights.
Yeah, I guess as a child of the 60s, coming up in the 60s and the 70s and seeing organizations coming forward and being visible, I'm disappointed in our elite section of our race and other people not coming up front, coming out, fighting against what's happening. That's all. I'm a little disappointed.
I'm equally as disappointed as you are, Attorney Grimes, and so disappointed in the legal community.
Yes, and the
Those law
NBA.
firms that right out of the gate just capitulated, and they are in the best position to speak out against these illegal and unconstitutional executive orders
Right.
that have been issued by the administration.
I've seen too many people get shot, killed, bombed for this to be taking place, and we don't seem to have a reaction to it.
Right. Well, the other thing too is important is that, certainly we should hold our leaders accountable, but all the listeners on the call, you have the power to get involved with these organizations, whether it's your sorority, fraternity, NAACP. We always need committee chairmen. We need, workers. I mean, these organizations are only as effective as all their members. So, as, has been indicated, hey, the solution is us.
Right.
And we all have to roll our sleeves up and, not say, hey, it's somebody else's responsibility, some, leader, but all of us to work collectively, find a place where you can get involved and you can be impactful, because these organizations were created in the aftermath of the last retention period following Reconstruction. All of our organizations were created during that time. So we just have to thunder back along the line, as we say in Phi Beta Sigma, and revitalize all these organizations and make sure they meet their true intention.
Everybody should do something. Everybody can do something, whether it's writing a check to the organizations that Attorney Primes mentioned, to going to the meetings from school board on up, to understanding and getting engaged and knowing about the judicial elections in your community, as they say, and it's absolutely true. All politics is local. So each of us have an independent obligation to, at this point, help to save our democracy.
Well, I'd like to thank each and every one of our guests for calling in. Also, shout out to Marlon's 35th anniversary. Congratulations, Marlon. 35 more years. Wonderful wife, great kids. Just proud of you guys.
Thank you.
And then
shout out to my wife, Kathy Howard Primes as well.
Yeah, the other thing too, thank you, Attorney Banks, for your inspiring suggestions today. I'm like Milton, I've been a little bit disappointed in certain things. And I hope and pray that the message resonate that we're articulating today. And so also next week is Memorial Day weekend, so we won't be broadcasting until then. Everybody stay healthy and start thinking about ideas to vote in the fall election. Thank you, everyone.